Hey everybody, it's Cody. My presentation's about supervision and evaluation, and specifically what Eufaula City Schools does to evaluate and supervise teachers. This model was put into place with our previous superintendent. It's called educator effectiveness and utilizes some good things. I was actually surprised at some of the things that we do that follow the cognitive coaching model, but then there's some things that we do that's not very robust, if you will, as far as things that we can put into place to really help our teachers get better. The things that I have been trained, the very little bit of training that I have done about using educator effectiveness is very evaluatory in nature. Very little of what I've been expected to do using this particular tool and our model is about supervision and growing teachers. I think a lot of that has been put onto the teachers and has kind of been taken out of the hands of the administrators, and maybe that's because of us having instructional coaches at the school, and I have not previously been in a school that had those. We currently don't have one at my school. It's a vacant position, so that has kind of fallen on the administrators to do. And like I said, a lot of what we do is not built toward that. It's more toward evaluation of our teachers. So what I wanted to get into, or the format that I looked at, or the way I organize this, is just to look at what the current practices are in Eufaula City Schools, and then talk about the self-assessment, which is similar to what everyone else does, the professional learning plan, or the PLP, and then the other aspects that really do kind of follow a cognitive coaching outline with a pre, post, and the observation that goes along with that. So we are doing some things that are good, but those things, the rationale sometimes falls through the cracks. And to be fair, this was put together before I started working in Eufaula. So these conversations may have been had. They've just not been had in the 2 years I've been in the system. And so to get started with that, I want to look at current practices, and specifically where we start at the beginning of the year. We send a link to a Google form to our teachers for them to do their self-assessment. In this self-assessment, they rate themselves on 8 indicators. You can see those indicators below: the standards-based instruction, classroom management, rigorous questioning and discourse, 21st century skills, and so on. The ones that are picked more often than not are classroom management, standards-based instruction, and 21st century skills. People stay away from differentiated instruction, and I think a lot of that has to do with the feeling of RTI or IEP or 504 for whatever reason. That may make people steer away from that, but of course that shows a poor understanding of what differentiation is. Balanced assessment's a very vague idea, and a lot of folks stay away from that. We do have people that pick that, but that to go along with that, we have to have a very long and sometimes tedious conversation to really tease out what balanced assessment is. Student engagement, it was the one that we picked as an administrative team for our school-wide indicator, because it's a big deal, and it kind of went along with some of the things curriculum-wise that we were trying to do with the A+, and Amstein, Project Lead the Way, and all these things have pieces in them that really try and serve or promote student engagement. So using this self-assessment, teachers submit the self-assessment. It comes to the administrators, and then we assign ourselves, or we are assigned by the principal, different departments. I serve the math, science, and PE departments normally. If we were fully staffed, we are not. So essentially we are taking care of everybody between the two administrators, but math, science, and PE are the areas that I do, and essentially it's because of my math background. I'm certified in PE, and I suppose since my wife's a science teacher, I look at those folks. So once we do the self-assessment, we set up a time to meet with our teachers, and then the teachers come to our office, and then we try and set up the PLP, or the Professional Learning Plan. I've already mentioned the school-wide indicator that we do, and this year it was student engagement, and I think that's a good goal. That's something we should be striving for, and it certainly does sort of cover a lot of the other things with, say, rigorous questioning and discourse and 21st century skills, because trying to make sure kids are engaged, you're going to be utilizing some of those other indicators, and that was my rationale when I suggested that back last summer for us to choose student engagement as our school-wide indicator. Then teachers are allowed to choose their own indicator. Most teachers have learned how to game the self-assessment system, and they will mark themselves low on something that they are either interested in doing some professional development on, or taking an e-learning course, reading a book about, or trying to pursue because it's easy for them to do, or they know they have some PD that's coming down the road that will allow them to meet that requirement, or meet the bar of whatever that particular indicator may be. And that's one problem that we have, and maybe that's not even a problem. Maybe that's just being very aware of what is coming and the things that they will be able to do. The other problem that is more challenging for me is when a teacher marks themselves as effective or exemplary on all the indicators. And we do have some very good teachers, but I don't know that all of them are exemplary in all areas. But it happens, and what that forces us to do during our initial conversation with our teachers is to really flesh out, what does it mean to be exemplary? What does it mean to be effective? And of course, we have a rubric that goes along with every indicator that teachers are supposed to use. And what I have done with those teachers is actually pull the rubrics out and then ask them to validate or verify their opinions of why they think they are exemplary in a particular area. And I usually will start with something like balanced assessment, because it is a very difficult thing for many folks to articulate, and that sort of gets the ball rolling in the discussion about, okay, well, this, maybe we're not exemplary here, maybe we're not even effective, so let's go back and look at developing. And I think a lot of the issue is teachers don't want to mark themselves as developing because it's on the bottom half of the spectrum of things they can rate themselves on. And so we talk through the stigma, and certainly a lot of that has to do with me telling them that the only people that are going to see that is me and them and possibly the principal. And so we try and alleviate some fears there that this isn't going to the central office. We're not going to be publishing this information. This is for them to get better. And again, this is where we do have some of the cognitive coaching ideas, but that's not something that we have been encouraged to do or use. That's just something I have done because I feel so strongly with relationships being such an integral part of what we do. So my biggest problem with a lot of what we do it has to do with this quote that I found, and it has to do with the fact that we are, as administrators, assumed to be good at evaluating teachers, and the truth is that's a difficult thing to do. And the truth is I've not really gotten a whole lot of training on how to do that. During an interview we're asked, how can you tell students are engaged? And I have my ideas of what engagement looks like, but that may be different from someone else. And certainly when we are trying to evaluate teachers, in which we do have to do that, we can certainly end up in a situation where we're not very good at it. The last part of this quote is very telling, because even though we are viewed as, say, being competent evaluators, whether or not that's the truth. We're not equally skilled in supervision. This is the supervision is probably the more difficult part. It takes more work and requires some difficult conversations from time to time, but it takes some self-realization on teachers' parts of being able to articulate their needs or identify their needs even, and then the willingness for them to hear some things that they may not want to hear about how they work in the classroom and how effective they may be in these different areas. And so that's certainly an issue. I mean, some people are not people persons. Some people are very abrasive. Even when trying not to be, they are abrasive, and I'm certainly guilty of that from time to time. And so it is difficult to have these relationships we always talk about. So my suggested improvements for the pre-observation conference is to actually have one. We kind of roll this into the PLP conversation, but we don't talk about any specific things that we want to look for in the observation. Teachers don't really come prepared for that because we don't tell them to come prepared for that. The other thing that goes along with that is we don't really put a whole lot of emphasis on trying to get into this observation immediately after the pre-observation conference or the PLP conversation, and we really should, to be as effective as possible. In our observation, again, I think a lot of what would make our observations more effective is to have the pre-observation conference to give us some focus as to what we are looking for, allow administrators to give better feedback, and our tool that we use to record our observations, in my opinion, is lacking. It's fairly rigid in the things that ask for. We use the same rating scale that the teachers used on those indicators, and we don't really have a whole lot of space to really talk about specific things. It's essentially very logistical things that we're being asked, and again, it's very evaluatory in nature. The post-observation conference, again, there's lack of structure, and again, I think if we emphasize cognitive coaching and what that entails and what that looks like with our administrators, then I think that it would make this post-observation, observation, pre-observation conference system much more effective, because we would actually know what our goals are and what we need to be doing and how to steer these conversations. To have this collegial inquiry that's referenced here from our Drago book, and these are things we need to be questioning, and we need to be questioning them often. We need to be looking at these things often. We need to be in these classrooms with these teachers often, but we need to be in these classrooms with a focus in mind, something that we are looking for, not just to be in there to check a box. We need to have a really, really good idea of what we are looking for. And so lastly, just to quote again about cognitive coaching, although we and Eufaula City have some things that look like cognitive coaching, we're not very specific in those things, and I'm certainly not one to say we have to be very rigid and we have to name everything that we do, but I certainly think a look into what cognitive coaching is and how to do it is certainly something that would make us more effective as administrators to support our teachers, to help with the supervision piece. The truth is, we do have to do some evaluation of our teachers. At the end of the year, we have to do a big evaluation piece that goes in their file. These are things the teachers sign off on, and it's something that they use to plan their PD for the summers. It's got to happen. Everyone has to be evaluated as far as their job performance goes. But certainly that will take care of itself if we are providing the appropriate supervision and we are supporting our teachers to get better. Because better teachers can deliver better lessons, and better teachers increase student achievement. And that's certainly our goal. Thank you very much for your time.